Happy New Year, everybody. I am so stoked. And not just because the holidays are over and I can go back to flip-flops. And not just because we're in this One Life initiative and now it's cool to wear t-shirts for the next 5 weeks also. I'm very excited because we are entering into just a momentous and historic season as a church. I'm excited for the transformation that God's gonna do in my own heart personally, between Tiffany and I and our marriage, in our church family, and ultimately the impact that's gonna have in the community. You got a little snapshot of what we're trying to do in the video. And I wanna ask you to turn in your Bibles to John, the Gospel of John chapter 1. The Gospel of John chapter 1, I'm gonna read verses 1 through 4 in the NIV, and then we're gonna jump in. John 1, 1 to 4. This is the passage of scripture that influenced the formation of this series and this initiative that we're in, One Life, and it reads as follows. John 1, 1 to 4. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The purpose of what we are doing in these next several weeks and over the course of the next 24 months is first about spiritual growth, and secondly, about financial growth. The purpose of the One Life initiative is to engage our faith and to inspire sacrificial generosity to fulfill Jesus' mission. He has a mission, and that mission is to freely give his eternal life to all and to transform our communities one life at a time. And so this is a spiritual journey. And it definitely has practical implications and goals. One of those goals is to build a larger adult worship space and to renovate this space for our kids, as you saw in the video. Now, maybe you're here for the first time. This is your first Sunday. Somebody invited you, and you're like, wow, this just got real. This is like going on a blind date, and your date is like showing you house plans and curtains for the nursery. Like, okay, I'm just gonna go. It's been fun. And so if you're here and you're new to Christ Church, or especially if you're brand new, we are not here to ask anything from you. I just want you to know that. We are a church family who is committed to our individual callings, our identity as a church family, our partnership in the gospel, as long as God has us serving together, worshiping together. And so we take that very seriously, and we're serious about growing in our relationship with God. And so if you're here, don't be scared. We're not asking you to do anything. We're actually inviting you to watch, to have a glimpse into what is the most important to us, something that's so valuable and so life-transforming to every one of us as individuals and to us as a church, that we actually change the way we live our lives to be able to give it freely to other people. And this is part of the reason why, from the beginning of Christ Church, we've never collected an offering. We wanted to make a loud statement to our guests that we don't want to take anything from you. We want to give something to you. And so we didn't talk about giving. We didn't make a collection or one or two or three. We put the boxes on the back wall. I mean, we were no-touch giving before no-touch giving was cool, all right? This is 3 years pre-COVID. We didn't talk about it, but this is part of the reason. Now, we do want to raise a couple $1 million, which for some of you that may seem impossible. For others of you who deal with large sums of money, that may seem like a very small goal. However it is perceived to you, it's not outside the scope of what God can do with willing people. Do you know that? If we can raise as little as $1.35 million, we can start our project. If we raise $3.35 million, we can pay cash for everything, pay off the little bit of loan that we have now, and be debt-free moving into this. And so these are not unreasonable goals, and they are specific and on purpose. I was talking to somebody recently who was asking me, they said, about how many people are contributing to Christ Church? And I told them the number, and they said, I thought that was the case. It's very interesting that if you take your $2 million goal and you divide it by $2,000, that's how many people we have. Did you know that? And I was like, yeah, I actually had noticed that. And they said, is that coincidence that we're expecting $2,000 stimulus checks right at the time when you're asking that if everybody gave I said, listen, this was not part of the plan. This was in place way before this. Don't worry, this is not a subtle way to extract your government-funded inflation. You do with that exactly what the Lord tells you. What we are looking for, even more than a certain dollar amount, is we're looking for 100% participation. Whether you are literally scraping by the skin of your teeth and don't know where tomorrow's food is going to come from, or you are sitting on millions yourself and could totally fund this with one check, the goal is that every single person, out of faith towards God and with making a significant sacrifice, is able to participate from a cheerful heart. That's the goal. We don't want to contort, we don't want to compel, we don't want to guilt. We want everybody to engage, but we do want to see 100% participation. Our timeline looks like this. We're going to have 5 Sundays in January, and in those 5 Sundays, we're going to be a part of this One Life sermon series with 5 sermons. We're going to talk about our source. We're going to talk about our mission. We're going to talk about our calling. We're going to talk about our purpose, and we're going to talk about our legacy. And then on February 7th, which incidentally is Super Bowl Sunday, we are going to have the big show right here, Commitment Sunday, and it's at that point that we're expecting God to have worked into our minds and our hearts and our spirits, and that is when we are going to engage on February the 7th. That weekend, we're going to have a 24-hour prayer event. We're going to be praying on site from noon on the 5th of February to noon on the 6th of February in 30-minute increments. You will have a chance to sign up, participate. For those of you who are insomniacs, we desperately need the middle of the night hours to be filled. So if you don't sleep anyway, you might as well just come on out, and we'll pray through the night. And I'm so excited about how God's going to meet us in that. And in the series, in the month of January, we're also clearing all of our large groups, our Thursday night large groups. We're not having any of them in the month of January. And we are going to have 2 Thursday night vision nights where we will be able to get nuts and bolts on the project, answer any questions that you have a discussion, and hopefully answer the questions that are ringing in your ears before we get to Commitment Sunday. Now, here we are the first Sunday in 2021, and I'm super proud of you for being in church. For those of you who cannot be here physically, thank you for streaming. We love you. We consider you part of our family. We pray for you. Every Sunday, I like to look at the comments and see who is watching and who is commenting. So thank you for participating. As you can see, we have a wonderful full house, and 40% of our congregation is still engaged online, which means we don't have enough room for the people that are here. And so we've got to do something before everybody decides to come back to church. So if you're home feeling guilty, please do not. You're actually doing some people a service. And here we are saying goodbye to 2020 and hello to 2021. And I'm trying to engage with my kids to help them to understand this. And so we got some takeout Friday night, and I took Meredith to go pick up the food. And so we go for a little drive, and I'm trying to always, whenever I'm one-on-one with my kids, I always want to have like more meaningful conversation and draw them out and connect with them and talk to them. And so I said to Meredith, I said, babe, can you believe 2020's almost over and it's going to be 2021? I said, when you're daddy's age, it's going to be 2050. And you might as well have told her she was going to live forever. 2050? She was like, you think I'll be alive in 2070? And I was like, yeah, you'll be the same age as Granny Cat. She's like, really? And she said, what about 20, what comes, she's like 2100. She goes, what is that? I said, you could still be alive in 2100. You could see that. I said, you know Miss Marilyn that sits behind us in second service? That's how old she is. If you live to be her age, you'll see 2100. She was like, mind blown. And so we chatted a little bit more, and we picked up the food, and we're heading back to the house. And so we started that conversation over again, and she goes, I am so glad that 2020 is over, like it was anything to her, right? But she's just kind of replaying what she's hearing other people talk about. Oh, let's put this year behind us, put this year behind us. And so I wanted to engage with her and have a conversation about perspective and about how we feel about the future and about the past. And so I remembered how I felt at Y2K. Anybody remember we were going to party like it was 1999? Is the whole world going to shut down? All the mainframe computers are going to die. It's going to be a zombie apocalypse. Remember all this stuff? And so I was trying to engage with her on the feeling I had as an 18-year-old in 1999 heading into 2000, and the difference, the kind of inversion of the feeling we have leaving behind 2020 with this hope for 2021. And so I said, babe, when I was 18, it was 1999 and it was turning into the 2000s, and here we are 20 years later. And she goes, wow, Dad, she says to me, so you got to be alive in these days and in the olden days? Yes. I stopped talking at that point. I was like, turns out I'm just old. But isn't it funny how our perspective changes everything? The way we see our world affects everything about the way we operate in it. How we feel about it, how we think about it, how we act in it. And so we have this unique opportunity here, the first Sunday of 2021, to really consider how we see what we see. It's funny, as I've mentioned in the past few months leading up to this initiative, our plans, lots of people have the same questions. One of the purposes for these vision nights is to answer those very common questions that most of you are having if you're thinking about this. But one of the most kind of quick questions that I get from people who don't mind telling me what they actually think, and I love you people, by the way. I'm definitely a fan of people who say it like it is, speak their mind right away. And one of the questions I've been getting is, why now? Some people go, are you sure this is the right time for this? Like, why in the world would you want to do this right now? It seems like we have economic instability, we have political uncertainty. It doesn't seem like maybe this is exactly the right time. In fact, for some people, they would say, this might actually be the worst time that you could possibly do something like this. And if you do it at this time, might you expect just a far smaller response than you get at a better time? And so, timing is everything. And my answer to that question is really, it all depends on how you see it, isn't it? See, we set these markers for this move in our growth and our story as a church years ago. We knew what our capacity was in one service, and we pushed that to be as big as we could get it, and we knew what it would be at 2 services, and we knew what our growth rates would be. And this whole kind of COVID quarantine helped us out a little bit by giving us a whole online campus full of willing people who are happy to stay home. And so we had this little opportunity for us to be able to not have to go to a 3rd service right away. But now is the time for a number of reasons. But it really doesn't have much to do with the condition of the world around us. It matters more the faith of the followers of Jesus and how we choose to see the world as it truly is. And this is why I want to bring us to John's gospel. Do you ever wonder why there's 4 gospel narratives? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You ever think about that? Why do we need 4? Why not 5 or 10 or just 1? And when you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, what you see is they're very, very similar. They follow the same kind of flow, the same organization. They have many of the same details, and they're only aimed at different people groups. Mark's was the earliest. Mark's was written to a Roman culture. It shows the power of Jesus, an inverted version of Roman power, not top down, but bottom up. Luke was writing to a Gentile audience that didn't have all the Jewish history and relied on his scientific mind and evidence and eyewitness testimony. Matthew wrote to a Jewish audience to show them how Jesus was the fulfillment of all of the Old Testament texts again and again and again. It was written and it was fulfilled. It was written and it was fulfilled. And so all of these gospels look the same and are speaking to the audiences that the good news about Jesus was reaching in the 1st century. And they were all written in about the same time period, within 15 years of each other and for different purposes. And then John's gospel, one of the last books of the New Testament to be written, was written when John was very old, in the late 80s of the 1st century or the early 90s. And John's gospel reads differently, it sounds differently, it looks differently. It doesn't include some of the most important things like the virgin birth. That's kind of a big deal. Not in there. And John writes in a certain way. He depicts Jesus in a certain way. He's organized in a certain way. Why do you think John's gospel's there? Part of the reason for John writing his gospel late in life was because he was the only gospel writer that was writing on the other side of a calamity that changed the Near Eastern world. It's one that you may have heard of, but we're largely disconnected. It happened in AD 70 after a 3-year siege. You see, after Jesus died, was resurrected, and ascended into heaven, and the church of Jesus was initiated. The apostles began to go out and share the good news. The church was growing. In the middle of that, there was also a Jewish uprising. Jews that didn't turn to Jesus and follow Jesus fought against Rome for political power and actually took over the city of Jerusalem and told Rome, you're out, we're in. And they basically started a revolution to the world superpower, much like the beginning of our American country. We said to the British, nope, we're going to be independent and free. Except in AD 70, after a 3-year siege under the leadership of Titus, Rome sacked Jerusalem, destroyed its walls, slayed its people, and toppled the temple, never to be rebuilt again. To make a very loud statement that no one stands up to Rome and gets away with it. It was an utter desolation. and it changed the viewpoint and the mind of everybody living in the first century, Jews and Christians alike. Can you imagine what it would be like to be either a faithful Jew or a Christian who sees the Jewish Messiah, Jesus, as the central figure, God himself incarnate, come to fulfill all the promises, to watch the city of Jerusalem, the city of David, the very place of the dwelling of God, not only destroyed, but the temple where he dwelled, demolished. How does that fit into your worldview? Changes the way you think about everything. And because of that, a bunch of weird heresies about Jesus began to promulgate throughout the first century. John was one of the last living apostles, and here he is in late stages of his life, in his 80s or maybe 90s, looking back in his own life to his own personal encounter with Jesus, what Jesus said and did and what that meant, what the early church believed and how they functioned. And he incorporated the destruction of Jerusalem and the demolition of the temple into a worldview that helped people understand who Jesus truly was and what God was up to and what that meant for all people. See, we've gone through a little hiccup, a little economic hiccup, a little political hiccup, a little physical pandemic. It's a hiccup. And it's shaken us. For many people, it's gone, how is the world going to be? I mean, think about how different the world is. I mean, just think, we're kind of enjoying this environment here where everybody's kind of relatively unmasked, although if you're comfortable wearing a mask in this crowd, we're glad you're wearing a mask and no one's going to give you a hard time. But you go into any grocery store and you only get to see people's eyes. At this point, I'm like nostalgic about bad breath. Like, I'm just like, breathe on me, somebody. Remember close talkers? Remember like moving away from somebody and they just keep moving towards you? I would just nuzzle up to a close talker at this point. Like, can you imagine how different our world is and how is it going to be? What's it going to be like for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? How's our world going to change? You see, we have a pivot. We have a moment where everything gets different. And all of us are experiencing it differently. It is not monolithic. Everybody's perspective, everyone's experience differs greatly. And yet, there is a reality that when received with the eyes of faith, gives you a strength, a stability, a determination, a power to live into the future toward God and to do things that people who cannot see the world the way it is would never do. So is this the right time? I say, absolutely. Absolutely. So back to John 1:1-4. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. Can you guys think of another book of the Bible that starts in the beginning? You see, John's doing something very purposeful in the opening line of his Jesus story. He is helping his first century readers and all readers of the Bible of all times to zoom out from our myopic view on our own circumstances, difficult as they may be, to take in the meta-narrative of God's story. All of us have a story. All of us are shaped by our story, but we exist in his story. Do you know it? And so John is very purposeful to say, do you remember the revelation of the creator God, the covenant-making God, the God of Israel, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? And when he revealed himself to his people through Moses, the narrative begins, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He says, I want to tell you about my Jesus because he was there in the beginning. You see, all of us are living in sometimes a meta-narrative that we don't think about. Have you guys ever heard that term, meta-narrative? Anybody? It's kind of this like newfangled postmodern idea, but it's really helpful to think about. A meta-narrative is an overarching account or interpretation of events and circumstances that provides a pattern or structure for people's beliefs and gives meaning to their experiences. And all of us have one. You may know what yours is, you may not. You may be a nationalist or a globalist. You may be a liberal or a conservative. You have a meta narrative. It depends on your gender, where you were born, to whom you were born, when you were born, how much money you were born with, and how much money you have now, what your education level was. All of us have shaped in the back of our minds and our subconscious a meta-narrative, this overarching account, the story. It's an interpretation of events and circumstances, and it provides us a structure for our belief system and gives us meaning to our experiences. And John is helping his readers to reconnect their experience in the first century, having experienced what they never thought would happen, the destruction of Jerusalem, the demolition of the temple. When and how is God going to fulfill his promises? And he goes, actually, he already did. He did it in Jesus. And let me show you the connection. He says, in the beginning. John's gospel is beautifully constructed. It begins with this prologue. It goes all the way through to verse 18. You should definitely read that before the day is out. And then it's in two sections, a book of signs or miracles, where Jesus does these 7 miracles. And then a book of glory. It's about the Last Supper and the last moments of Jesus' life spent with his disciples, his betrayal, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. And it ends with an epilogue in chapter 21, where Jesus appears to 7 disciples who are fishing, and then he reinstates Peter. And this is such a beautiful story. I would love for you to spend some time in John's gospel during this series. John also loves the number 7. And so John is convincing his readers of the identity of Jesus, and he does that with 7 witnesses. And so as you read through the Gospel of John, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 witnesses who are saying, this is who Jesus is, this is who Jesus is, this is who Jesus is. He gives these 7 signs or miracles I've already mentioned. And then there's the famous 7 I am sayings of Jesus. Now in the Old Testament, who is I am? God, Yahweh, the God of Israel. He is I am that I am. And so Jesus says, I am, I am, I am. He doesn't say I'm. We contract to I'm. You could have said in Greek, e me. But he says, ego eimi. Just like in Spanish, you could say soy or yo soy for emphasis. If Jesus was Mexicana, he would have said, yo soy. I am. Because he's connecting to I am that I am. And these themes that are all in this prologue develop in this book and give meaning to them. Light and darkness, death and life, belief and unbelief, and then the oneness, Jesus with his Father, and Jesus to his followers, and then believers of Jesus reconnected to God. This is all about the identity of Jesus. And John does us a great service. I love when writers do this. He gives us his purpose statement. In John chapter 20, verse 30 and 31, at the end of book 2, we read, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, countless miracles. But these were not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe. Somebody say believe. So that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, the King, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Something miraculous happens when the good news of Jesus, who he truly was and what he truly did, reaches your ears. That news goes into your mind, and when you believe it, you become a recipient of the life that God created you to experience. There is one life, brothers and sisters, that is true life, and it has one source, and his name is Jesus. All of us, hopefully, are alive. Most of us are awake. We're enjoying deep breaths and a beating heart and caffeinated bloodstream. We are experiencing life. Hopefully, you're also living life and enjoying life and experiencing it with people that you love and walking in purpose with goals and a future. Maybe you're making New Year's resolutions about ways you want to improve in your experience of life. You see, we were made to live. And yet what John speaks to a world that does not know Jesus is that the life you're living is missing the life you were made for. Do you know that? We feel very much alive, don't we? But John says, actually, you're mostly dead. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead, right? You guys know where I'm going with this. Listen, if you want to stick around to be a part of Christ Church, watch The Princess Bride before the month is out, okay? The only way you'll ever connect with half of my sermon illustrations, The Princess Bride. We're mostly dead. We're just physically alive enough to meander through the course of this life until we die. And God doesn't want us to die to eternal death. He wants us to live to eternal life. And so Jesus came to give life. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. And so until you have the life that comes from believing in Jesus, you can't see the world as it truly is. What does that mean? That means you may be physically alive, and you may look into the world and think you see something, but here's the good news. Maybe you're walking in darkness. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't actually there. I had this happen to me this morning. I was working on my computer since the wee hours, had the little blue light screen in my eyeballs, and I go to lovingly wake up my precious bride, and I bring her coffee, and I walk into our dark bedroom, and I do not know what is on the floor in front of me. And so I find myself taking these very slow and cautious steps. Is that the rug? Is there a shirt? Is this a cat or a child? Is this a toy? Am I about to find a Lego? And I take these very slow steps until I get to her nightstand, where I don't know if I'm going to set down this cup of coffee on the edge of her phone or her glasses and allow it to pour all over the floor. So I'm wiping off with my hand, feeling with my hand, set her coffee down. What am I doing? I can't see. I know something of what I'm doing, but I don't have the clarity of the light. And it's only my love for her that keeps me from turning it on, right? How many of us are living life and we're so accustomed to the darkness and living with this caution and this care because we can't see what truly is. See, in him is life, and that life is the light of all mankind. See, John does this cool thing where he does these pairs. It's a beautiful way of writing. He's so creative. And we see it even in these first verses. He says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, he was with God in the beginning. Opens within the beginning, closes within the beginning. You see that? He's going to do that all throughout the book. And he's saying, hey, I got a really important thought right here. And I put brackets around it, in the beginning, in the beginning. And what is in the brackets? The Word. The Word. What a strange thing to call Jesus. The Word. The Word. What does he mean when he calls him the Word? The Greek word there is logos. I don't know if you guys are Greek nerds, Bible students, you know this, logos. In the original language, this had a series of connected meanings. Logos, the word, it's the way we understand each other. You ever say that to somebody? Hey, can I have a word with you? That usually means buckle up, you did something wrong, right? Can I have a word with you? Oh, what are we talking about? I'm about to speak my mind. I'm about to let you know something you don't. I'm about to communicate with you. And this is logos, the word as revelation. Look, in the beginning, Genesis 1:1-5, as John's connecting to the overarching meta-narrative of the story of God as revealed to his people. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Who created them? Yeah. And who was with God? And who was God? And without who was not anything made that was made. You guys have a Jehovah's Witness come to your door? And they want to tell you about Jesus. But their Jesus and our Jesus are not the same character. And if you open up the New World Translation to John 1:1, you're going to read, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was a God. They're going to add a little article right there. And they believe that Jesus was made by God, and then God used Jesus to make everything else, that he is the firstborn, that he is not equal with God. That's their fundamental belief. This is why they're fundamentally unchristian. And the answer to this, and I've had this conversation, I used to love to engage with the Jehovah's Witnesses because I like to argue. And I know things from the Bible. And so I would get the Jehovah's Witness and I would like, you want to come in? Oh. And they would come in and then we'd have the conversation and I'd see them visibly shaken. And they always do the same thing. The next day, somebody higher up on the food chain shows up until the big boss shows up. And once the big boss knows he's not getting through to you, they check you off the list. So listen, if you want them to stop coming to your door, get a Greek New Testament, open to John 1:1, and ask them, where's the A? Where's the A God? Because it's not there. They add it there. And then why did you add it there? They'll say, because Jesus was created by God. And so he was a God, but he wasn't the God. Yes, but it says, through him all things were made. And without him was not anything made that was made. And you're saying he was made without himself. The one whom nothing was made without him, by whom all things were made. It defies logic. Do you see what I'm saying? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. See the darkness? And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. We have the triune God right here in Genesis 1. God, the Father creating, Spirit hovering, and God said the word. Let there be light. Jesus has been in the light-giving business since the beginning. By him, light was made, and things became visible. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. God called with his words the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning on the first day. You see, Logos is the revelation of God. It's the expression of God. Jesus is the one by whom we know what God means, what God says, and what God does. Secondly, the Logos, the word. You start to read your Old Testament, look for this phrase, the word of the Lord came to. Do a search, it's so fun. The word of the Lord came to. You know how many times it just says, and the Lord said, and the Lord said, and the Lord said? And then at some point, it says, the word of the Lord came to. Different construction. The word of the Lord came to. You know the first person the word of the Lord came to? Somebody who had already heard God's voice. Abraham. In Genesis 12, God said to Abraham, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. This is Israel's story. This is their meta-narrative. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. This was God's promise to Abram, the promise that would reach all people. But notice in this promise, there is no promise of an offspring or a child. So God's saying the impossible to Abram. Do you know that? I'm going to make you a great nation. Everyone's going to be blessed through you, in you. And he's like, there's nobody in me. I've got no one in me. And it's 3 chapters later, when Abram's lived years now with having received this promise and followed God, but have no clue how this is going to work. You want to talk about an impossible task. You want to talk about, is this the right timing? I'm old and getting older. No son, you made this promise, no way to see its fulfillment. And then in Genesis 15, verses 1, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram. And what did God say? I'm going to give you a son. Your heir is not going to be your nephew or your cousin, Eliezer. No, I'm going to give you a son to be your heir. Do you see the light that comes on? Do you see the details? Through the word. The question is, are we listening? And we see this phrase happen over and over again. The word of the Lord comes to Samuel, the first prophet. The word of the Lord comes to Solomon, the great king. The word of the Lord came to Elijah, Nathaniel, Shemaiah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. 48 times in Ezekiel, the word of the Lord came to me. How many of you here can say, you know what? The word of the Lord came to me. And his name is Jesus. I heard something calling my name. I felt a stirring in my spirit that there was a bigger world at play. There was more going on than what I could see. I was fumbling and stumbling through the darkness. The life I was living was not leading me to happiness, joy, and fulfillment. And I'm trying to sort it out. And I heard the word. And the word of the Lord came to me. All the prophets, all the way through to Malachi. And then we get the oracle of the word. And what does Malachi tell us? I'm going to send my messenger to prepare the way for me, and then the Lord who you seek is going to come into his temple. John the Baptist preparing the way, and then Jesus on the scene. Every expectation of God to reveal himself, for him to come. The word of the Lord, his meaning, self-expression. Logos is also the word as a representative image, like an icon. We actually use our English word logo straight from Logos. Here's some logos. You guys recognize any of these? If you're listening online, what do we got here? Shout them out. The Nike swoosh, the Target circles, McDonald's. Yeah, good. Oh, you guys are really excited about this. I thought this would be better received. You guys know what every one of these companies is, sells. When you look at those double arches, can you literally taste the salt? I mean, think. How many of you guys are like, now you're craving a latte? You see the Starbucks emblem? there's an association with these images to a product or a company or a reality or an experience, and as soon as we see this image, we connect to the greater reality. This is a picture of the Logos, the Word represented as an image. This is who Jesus has come to be. It's amazing because it's in Jesus that we understand God. All of us are out there coming up with wackadoo ideas about what God is like, asking normal questions that human people walking in darkness would ask. Why are evil things happening in the world? Why did God allow this and stop this? When will this change? Why could this happen? These are normal questions that all human beings would ask. You are not the first one to ask. You are not the last one to ask. You will find lots of people with lots of answers. Some you will find satisfactory and others not. Brothers and sisters, I am here to tell you that without Jesus, you will not be able to see. But when you see Jesus, suddenly everything else becomes crystal clear. You begin to be able to live in this world as it truly is and not merely as it appears. This is the gift of faith. This is what believing in the person of Jesus does to your soul and the spiritual eyes that it gives you. The author of Hebrews says it this way: long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, and the word of the Lord came to, and the word of the Lord came to. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. You want to see God? See Jesus. You want to know God? Know Jesus. You want to find out about God and see the world as it truly is? Follow Jesus. He's the one who upholds the universe by the word of his power. And after making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. Do you know we have a victorious Jesus who has done his work and is now seated in power? To him we give allegiance and to him we follow. To him we look to for provision and direction and wisdom. He is our King. He is our Savior. His story is our story. And when you walk in his meta-narrative, when you know him and follow him, he gives you eyes to see the world as it truly is. Is this a great time to ask people, invite people to give generously? The world would say, no, hold on to what you have. Ah! God says, it's all mine anyway. If I want it, I can just take it. You want to talk about wealth redistribution? Watch what God can do. All the stories in the Old Testament. You know, the Israelites left Egypt as slaves, and they left loaded with all the gold and riches they could carry. They left with all of Egypt's wealth. I mean, they had no place to spend it. There was no Tanger outlet in the desert. But they left with everything. Listen, God right now can be storing up profits in some evil person's hands, only to move them over at just the right time for just the right reason. Listen, we don't see the world the way the world sees it because we have the light of the Logos, the Word. Lastly, the Logos is what gives meaning or explanation. And so it's something you have to engage your mind in. You have to think about it. Do you guys remember taking speech class and learning to give a persuasive speech? Was I the only one paying attention in speech class? You remember there was the idea of ethos, pathos, and logos. Do you guys remember that? Ethos was like ethic, are you dependable? Are you communicating to your audience in a way that they perceive you as trustworthy? And so there's this ethos. There's this pathos. Are you passionate about it? Is your heart in it? Are you empathizing with your hearers? Do they connect with you on an emotional level? And then there was the logos. Is what you are saying making sense? And I can tell when I'm high on the logos factor and when I'm low, because I get this face from you guys. I'm like, I'm not explaining this very well. What? Yeah. So I see that face and I know, back up the bus here, let's try this again. This idea of logos, of logic, of explanation, of meaning. Listen, we do not have a faith that is just like esoteric and mystical and disconnected from reality, that's just somehow kind of just ours, that we've just taken it in, and it's just kind of our personality type, and if that's good for us, and what's good for you. No, we are the people who are following as king the creator of the universe. Do you know that? See, when we walk out of these doors, we are representing the God who made and owns everything and everyone, and who has explained himself very clearly in the person of his son. And as we follow him and learn from him and understand him, our minds get changed and our understanding fills out, and we begin to see as those for whom the darkness has lifted. This is a lifelong journey, but in following Jesus, we really get to use our minds. We dust off our thinking caps, we listen to the words God has spoken, and we allow it to change the way we live. Now, people will be amazed when they see the way it changes you live. Why would anybody ever change their standard of living so they can increase their standard of giving? Why would anybody do that? Why would anybody sit out at the beginning of the year and go, what can we do to give away money? Let's not go on vacation, or let's sell something, or let's dissolve these interest-bearing stocks. The world would say, what are you smoking? The answer is, you don't see the world the way I see the world. I see a bigger picture with a greater field to invest in. I see people precious to God, disconnected from his life-giving spirit, who, if there was a space for them, would encounter God in his presence with his people in a way that they would have life in Jesus' name. And they would have light to see the world as it is. And he would begin a journey of transformation. And you cannot put a dollar amount on that. So you will live different because you see difference. What type of people plan to be sacrificial for the benefit of people who are no benefit to them? Some of you are like, have a hard time just giving money to relatives. Here, I got you this. Can I borrow? Oh, God. Just keep it. What happens in a human heart when we go, there is a person who I don't know that does not do things that benefit me, maybe doing things that harm me, that I want to give so that they can come into God's presence. They don't know me or care. They don't want to be here. They're not going to do anything to make my life better, but they're precious to God, so they're precious to me. Now, there's actually lots of people like that. They're called parents. You think about this for a second, right? You have these children. And listen, Tiffany and I would have had 10 children. We had an age cutoff limit. We got married young. We could have 7 kids right now if the Lord had given them to us early. We've talked about it. Our 4 could be our bottom 4. But we had our first one when God said yes. He gave us our miracle baby, and then 3 after, and we got to our cutoff age, and we said, okay, 4 it is. 4 is a full house. Quiver's full. But I love my children, and I will divest myself for their good for the rest of my life. And any good parent would do the same. Why? Because you see the world differently than you did when you were single. I never once think of all the cool things I could be doing right now if it wasn't for you and you and you and you. You don't think like that, do you? No. And if you do, you need Jesus. And I'm so glad you're here, because the lights are off. Okay, let's wrap this up. Let me have the worship team. You guys can join me on stage. One of the downsides of living in America in the 21st century is most of us grew up on a Jesus story that was mostly aimed at our personal salvation. And that's not untrue. At the heart of the good news about Jesus is forgiveness of sins and personal salvation, eternal life. But that small part of the story, when it's taken as the whole, it actually darkens all of the rest of it. Do you know that the good news about Jesus is not just that God loves you and has a good plan for your life and you get to go to heaven when you die? That is not the gospel. That is an implication of the gospel. The gospel is the good news of God became man so that in him we might be reconnected to his life-giving spirit, to be his emissary, ambassador, image bearer, and creator on the planet. Do you know that when God said, let there be light, he then called the light day and the darkness he called night? And after God created Adam, what did Adam give him to do? He showed him all of creation and said, what will he call it? You see, you were called into a story much bigger than you, but one that you play an incredibly important part in. It's not just fire insurance so I can sleep well at night and know that God forgives me and I'll go to heaven when I die. No, you are now part of God's meta-narrative, the rulership of King Jesus, who's accomplished forgiveness and salvation for all mankind. But it's good news in his name that's being given to all people. This is what we are engaged in. This is what we give sacrificially for. This is what our purpose and overarching meta-narrative story ought to be. Every single one of us fits into it uniquely and differently. We should be interconnected and interdependent. We should be synergistic and working to make the whole thing operate better and more smoothly. Every single one of us has a part to play. But there's a whole world out there that God wants to reconnect through faith in Jesus, to give life, to give light. And this is what this campaign initiative is about. This one life. It starts with the one life, the one source of life, and his name is Jesus. And it's his news that we're bringing. And here's the miracle. You can't change anybody's mind. Trust me, I do it professionally. I can't change anybody's mind. But when God is at work in a human heart, and the truth of who he is in Jesus reaches ears, a miracle of faith happens and lives are changed. And people find their value and their place and their purpose, and they find power to forgive and be restored and to walk in truth and to walk in the light and to have their relationships put back together and to find meaning and purpose. This is something none of us can do, but it's what God does, and it's why we're doing what we're doing. And this is what this is about. It's about making room for more people to have this experience so that they can bring that good news to more people so their lives can be changed forever. John 1:9-13, and I'll end here. This is the end of that prologue. The true light, which gives light to everyone, somebody say everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the rights or the power or the authority to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but born of God. Listen, we are in the business of creating an environment for the miracle of regeneration to occur, where God brings dead people to life and open blind eyes and begins the journey of transformation. I am telling you, Tiffany and I, we've given our lives vocationally to ministry, but we are followers of Jesus, not just pastors. Do you know that? We're gonna live this life whether there's a building or a church or a gathering or whatever happens, because we want people to be who God made them to be, to have what God gave them to have, to walk in joy and passion and purpose, and to experience the world as it truly is. And that happens when they connect to the truth of Jesus and believe in his name. And that is for as many as who will believe. I believe that there's some listening to me, either present in this room or online, that you haven't made that connection, and you're hearing this good news about Jesus, and the lights are coming on, and you're going, I need that life. I need that purpose. I need that value. And this is the miracle of regeneration. So I wanna urge you to say to God, I trust you, I believe you. I believe this Jesus to be true. Do this miracle in me. I believe, and I'm gonna receive and watch the miracle begin. We're gonna see this happen again and again and again and again. We're gonna lead people through the waters of baptism. We're gonna see the church of Jesus grow. We're gonna watch lives be transformed. This is what the future holds for everyone who is part of this One Life initiative, this church family, and the Church of Jesus Universal. Amen? God, I pray for every person in my hearing that does not have life in your name, even if they know lots of true things about you, even if they walk in a shadow near the light. God, whatever the distance is, whatever the disconnect is, I pray right in this moment that there would be life given in Jesus' name, that they would be born of God and begin this journey. God, I pray you do the miracle that only you can do, and the lights would come on and life would truly begin. Lord, we believe and we receive in Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen. Amen. Let's stand and sing.